There are 5 parts to my anti-corruption laws for members of Congress. If we put these in place, it will ensure that our representatives are working on behalf of us instead of themselves and their donors. First, 12-year term limits. Second, no active trading of individual stocks while in office. Third, disclosures of meetings between members of Congress and lobbyists. Fourth, a 4-year prohibition on lobbying after leaving office. And fifth, the disclosure of dark money from super PACs. Here's my reasoning behind these 5 parts. First, 12-year term limits. We all know that with very few exceptions, the longer a member has served in Congress, the more likely they are to become compromised. That's why we need term limits. So why did I pick 12 years? The answer is we need to strike the optimal balance between minimizing corruption and maximizing the effectiveness of the institution. Rotating in new members will help minimize the corruption, and having long enough terms for members will ensure that we always have experienced leadership in these bodies to maximize the effectiveness of the institution. Right now, we don't have that balance. Congress does not work on behalf of the American people anymore because the leadership in Congress has been there too long. They are too out of touch, and they care more about making deals for their donors than they do about listening to the American public. Putting in place 12-year term limits strikes the perfect balance between rotating in new members of Congress and having experienced enough leadership to lead committees and get things done on behalf of the American public. I love math, so here's the mathematics behind coming up with a 12-year term limit for both members of the House and for U.S. senators. To find the average number of representatives in the House that will be rotating out every year, you take the number of members in the House, which is 435, and you divide it by the term limit, which is 12. That gives you approximately 36. That means that on average, 36 members out of the 435 members in the House will be rotating out every single year. That means that every 2-year election cycle, about 72 members of the House out of the 435 will be rotating out. But the number is actually going to be significantly higher than that because not every member of the House will serve out their full 12 years because of personal reasons, redistricting, the political climate, and just losing their re-election bid. So we are more likely to have somewhere between 90 and 100, and at times even more members of the House than that, rotating out every 2-year election cycle. That's about 20% of the House of Representatives, and I think that strikes a very good balance between rotating out new members and allowing more experienced members to continue gaining seniority and guiding the body. The average length of time that a member of the House serves right now is under 10 years. And that is even skewed because we have some senior leadership that has been in there for over 20 years, over 30 years, and we even have a half dozen that have been in there for over 40 years. And those are exactly the people we need to get out. If we do the same math with the Senate, we take 100 senators, we divide it by 12, that ends up being about 8. That means that every year, approximately 8 senators will be forced to rotate out because of term limits. So following that same math, that means that every 2 years, about 16 senators will be forced out because of term limits. But keep in mind, the number is actually going to be significantly higher than that because senators will leave for personal reasons or losing their re-election bids. So we'll more likely see 20 or more senators rotating out every 2-year election cycle, which means that about 20% of the Senate, just like about 20% of the House, will rotate out every 2-year election cycle. I think that maintains a very good balance between ensuring we have new people, new representatives in Congress, and having the leadership in place to make sure the body continues moving forward and operating effectively. During your first couple of years in office, you're building your team, building your staff, building relationships, learning the dynamics and the policies and the procedures of either the House or the Senate, and getting up to speed on all the nuances of the issues that you need to have command of. By years 3 and 4, you now have command of all of the issues, policies, procedures, and dynamics. You've built your team, you've built a machine around you, you've begun to forge important relationships and alliances within the rest of the House or the Senate. You now have enough knowledge to begin guiding congressional committees, to begin making an impact on legislation, and arguing for or against legislation in a powerful way on the House or Senate floor. Years 5 through 8, you now have enough experience and enough leadership position in Congress to begin making a significant impact on legislation by becoming vice chairs or chairs of congressional committees and subcommittees, and influencing and guiding the direction of younger members of Congress. In years 9 through 12, you are now a senior member of either the House or the Senate. You have enough experience to guide legislation, to be the chair of committees, and to be the House or Senate majority or minority leaders. And then you should be gone. It's not your job to stay in office, to continue trying to consolidate more power and money for your political party, to make the partisan divide even stronger. You should be gone. You should leave and let the next generation of leaders take over and continue to guide our country forward. And the last component of the 12-year term limits is, can you serve 12 years in the House and then 12 years in the Senate? And my answer to this is yes. And I know immediately you're going to say, but that means someone can serve 24 years in Congress and that's too long. But here's my reasoning behind it. There are 435 members in the House, but only 100 senators. That means just based on the sheer numbers, less than 25% of the members of the House will even have the opportunity to become a US Senator. That number is going to drop even further though, because the Senate terms are 6 years, and that's not going to match up with the terms in the House to serve out your full 12 years in the House. And beyond that, a member of the House isn't guaranteed to win that Senate seat because they're going to be running against a bunch of other prominent politicians from that state, including possibly governors and other important political positions from the state leadership. So it's my guess that in the very end, less than 10% of the members of the House will actually end up becoming US Senators. And if that less than 10% of the members of the House can successfully run a campaign that appeals to a statewide electorate instead of just those in their district, if they built a good enough reputation in their district and while serving in the US House of Representatives to run a successful statewide campaign for senator, then so be it. That is a meritocracy. I am not opposed to having the top 5 or 10% of the members of our US House become senators and become leaders in that body as well. So though it was long-winded, I wanted to give you the full explanation for why I believe 12-year term limits should be put in place for members of the House and the Senate, and why a member of the House or a member of the Senate could then switch bodies if they chose to. The second part is no active trading of stocks while in office. I hardly even have to explain this. Members of Congress determine policy and allocate trillions of dollars of taxpayer money, not only to just sectors of the economy, but oftentimes to individual companies or small groups of companies, and they should not be allowed to profit off an insider trade on those companies. By definition, they are picking the winners and the losers, and they should not be able to pick themselves to be a winner in that process. No more needs to be said about that. Third, disclosures of meetings between lobbyists and members of Congress. The public should be able to know who their representatives are meeting with and how often. The only alleged counter-argument to that are alleged privacy concerns, but that's garbage because we the public don't need to know exactly what you talked about in the meeting, but we do deserve to know and have the right to know who you're meeting with. If a representative is spending more of their time meeting with lobbyists on Capitol Hill that have nothing to do with the people in their district, we the public deserve to have that knowledge and to allow that to weigh into our next vote at the ballot box. Fourth, a 4-year prohibition on lobbying after leaving office. Now, some people will say we need to have a permanent ban on members of Congress becoming lobbyists after they leave, but here's why that's not even necessary. If we put in place the first 3 parts of this plan, the influence of lobbyists will be greatly diminished. With members of Congress serving only 12 years maximum, that means that 4 years after leaving office, they're going to lose 1/3 of the relationships of all of the members of Congress that they served with. But it's actually going to be more than that, because not everyone serves 12-year terms. When you leave office after 12 years, you will have formed the strongest relationships with the people who are also leaving office around the time that you are, not with the newest members of Congress. Therefore, your ability to lobby the people who are currently in Congress 4 years after you've left is a fraction of what it would be if the people who you were serving with were still in office. Right now, former members of Congress are being paid millions of dollars to become lobbyists to lobby the people they served with who are still in Congress. That's why their salaries are so high. That's why they have so much influence. With all of this put in place, the salaries of lobbyists are going to plummet. The influence of lobbyists is going to be diminished, and the influence of the people will increase. This is what the founders intended. They did not intend for power to be concentrated to a small group of rich, powerful, connected people. They intended for the representatives to actually represent their districts and their states in Congress. And the fifth and final part is the disclosure of dark money in super PACs. Super PACs are allowed to take in as many campaign contributions as they want from as many individuals and companies and nonprofits as they want. And there's a problem here because Certain nonprofits, such as 501c4s and 501c6s, do not have to disclose who's donating to those nonprofits, and therefore, when they make a donation to the super PAC, we have no idea who actually gave that money to the super PAC. It was funneled through an entity in which their identity can be concealed. That cannot be the case for a couple of reasons. Number one, we should have the right to know who is behind every political campaign in the country, whether or not they are directly or indirectly associated with a public candidate for a public office. Second, it is illegal for foreign nationals in foreign countries to donate money to political campaigns, but without full transparency of the entire chain of money, we can't ensure that. How do we know that foreign nationals and foreign governments and foreign corporations aren't funneling money into this dark money system? American citizens deserve to know 100% that that is not happening, and under the current laws, we do not have a 100% guarantee. In fact, I 100% guarantee that right now, through these dark channels of money, there is money coming in from foreign nationals, foreign corporations, and foreign governments, and it needs to stop. That's why we need new laws, full transparency of the dark money going into super PACs. So those are the 5 parts of my anti-corruption laws for members of Congress, and that is my reasoning behind them. These 5 things alone will restore a tremendous amount of integrity to Congress, clean things up, and get the institution working on behalf of the American public again. So vote for candidates who will target the core, the foundation of the corruption in our government institutions, because these are the laws that will put our country back on the right track the fastest and will permanently clean up the mess that has been created by the establishment. I'm Independent Joe Sweeney, and I approve this message.